Hello, and welcome to the Sedgwick podcast, where we explore innovations shaping the future of claims administration and risk management. My name is Kimberly George, and I serve as Sedgwick's Global Chief Brand Officer and host for today's episode. Be sure and hit the like button, as that helps share the podcast more broadly, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Today's topic is reskilling for the future. AI, technology, and human-centric innovation. Sedgwick recently conducted a 2026 global risk study, which is powered by the perspectives of Fortune 500 executives, Sedgwick's own clients, and industry leaders. Included in the trends reshaping our industry are workforce transformation and talent management. In years past, companies were fiercely focused on competition for talent as their top workforce challenge. However, our study now shows the current top challenge at 32% is changing employee expectations, while competition for talent came in as top challenge for 30% of respondents. Another top trend is leadership development. Transferring leadership skills, not just technical expertise, is a challenge for 47% of those who responded to our survey. And to dive deeper into these topics, my guest today is Ian Bell. Ian, welcome to the podcast.
Hello there.
Ian, why don't you introduce yourself, your role, and what the role means? You've got a big job here at Sedgwick.
No, I'm very happy to. And firstly, thank you for having me. My role, my title is I'm SVP of Global Talent Management. What that means day to day is that I look after our performance reviews, or I say I look after, my team and I look after our performance reviews. We look after talent reviews, succession planning. Leadership development is a big part of what we do, ensuring that we have programs for every level of leadership as they progress through the organization. And also we look after engagement and recognition and continuing education. So it's a wide-ranging role, but I'm fortunate enough to have some very good team members who understand a lot of it far better than I do.
Yeah, no, it's so important. And I think the survey just reiterates that it's not just a Sedgwick issue. Talent overall, workforce management, building our leaders of the future, but also having the right skills in this rapidly transforming industry, and certainly at our company. So thank you for that. I'm super happy that you were able to join us today. So let's start off with the shifting landscape. Why reskilling matters. Our survey shows that adapting to changing employee expectations is now it tops the list, as I just shared, of workforce challenges, with upskilling, reskilling close behind. Why has adaptation become so critical, and how is AI accelerating the need for ongoing learning?
I think the situation has always been that things like values mattered and purpose mattered to people, but there was much more of a focus on stability and a focus on compensation. When people were deciding to choose their career path or choosing whether to stay somewhere or move somewhere else. Those still matter today. Stability, of course, it matters, and compensation matters, but those are more the table stakes now, because people are much more fluid in their career planning, or maybe lack of career planning, and are looking for flexibility, are looking for aligning their purpose with the organization. So it's become a lot more human-centered in terms of the role, and people aren't looking always for the same job for the rest of their life now. They're looking for it to be part of a career path. And the more that companies like Centric can offer different career paths to people, the more likely we are to retain our best talent.
That's great. And then, do you see yet how automation is redefining roles? Or do you feel that may be coming?
No, I think we've seen a lot in a really short period of time. It's been quite an interesting evolution to watch, where in the early days of AI, people who would have it before companies adopted it, before we had it on our systems, our laptops and our phones and things, People had them on their private devices, and I think used them secretly to do work. I would ask it questions and then pass that work off as their own. So it was a very sort of covert way. I say that might just have been me.
Yeah.
I don't think it was. But a very covert way of using it, and those skills were being shared. Then it's kind of transformed into starting to be used a bit more overtly, a bit more comfortably, a bit more open. And firstly, it enabled us to do things quicker than when we used to do. Things we could do already, but it just made it quicker. Then it started moving into a much more way of looking at things it made things better. It did things better than we could have done before. And that was that's been quite interesting to see that emerge along with our own thoughts that we can add to that. Where it's exciting now is it's enabling us to do things that we could never do before. But the important thing has been, and this is a challenge in the hybrid world, is that shoulder-to-shoulder learning that used to happen when we were all in the office together doesn't happen quite so easily now, where we have to be much more intentional about that. And I know within our team, within the CR team, we've had from very early, from when Copilot was introduced, we had various challenges where you submit your favorite prompt, or what saved you the most time, or what was the process that you managed to improve using AI. And that enabled some really intentional sharing of best practice, which, as I say, is a challenge in the hybrid world today.
Yeah, that's great. Dig a little deeper into role-based pathways as opportunities for reskilling.
Yeah, I think it's things will change. It's not a case that AI isn't going to change anything. It will change things. In the same way, I see it that checkouts in supermarkets have changed, in that we scan our own items and go now. It doesn't need 5 cashiers to check you out. But those people can be redeployed to do other things that only humans can do. So I think what's going to happen is that the things that humans can't do, or can't do as quickly as AI, will move to AI. But those people who have the empathy to provide good customer service, to provide good people leadership, those skills are going to become more to the fore now, because they can't be replicated by AI.
When we think about elevating human work, as you were just really talking about, the soft skills, leadership, and that ability to create a connection, I think a lot about that and the importance in this on-demand world where people may be talking with a chat bot or engaging in a live chat. But when we actually have that person-to-person communication, how connection matters so much. And nearly half the leaders cite leadership skill transfer as the biggest development barrier. So leadership capability uplift is one of your part of the organization's area. So let's talk a little bit about that and maybe how we're going to elevate the human work in this rapid tech change.
It's a really good point, and as you mentioned, it's a big challenge for a lot of companies. And again, especially because we're not in and around seeing our leaders do things at the moment, so to identify that best practice so that we can make best practice standard practice. However, it's also important, I think, to acknowledge that the leaders of today and tomorrow, need to demonstrate different skills than the leaders of yesterday. The values or the attributes that were admired in previous years are different to those that are admired today. A more empathetic style of leadership tends to be favoured by people in the workforce today. So having the ability to demonstrate that empathy, to show that you care, to make human-centered decisions in the decisions you make is going to be crucial, and not just making sure you take that into account, but making sure that you show that you've taken that into account and show that people have been in the center of those decisions that have been made. And that's where I think we have the opportunity to start looking at which leaders around our business, or every organization has, which leaders around the business are demonstrating that already. Because that way we know that it's happening in our business, with our challenges, with our geographic footprint, with the things that we do. And therefore we can start making what happens somewhere happen in more places. What's working well sometimes work well more of the time. And that's my role, is very much that. So we've done a lot of work looking at what those capabilities are, not just those core skills of empathy and communication and relationship building, but certainly those, but also some of the harder business acumen competencies such as decision making or financial management and those things, because they all need to work together. But by doing that, we kind of identified what our leaders do and what our colleagues do on their good days, when we get it right, when we're at our best. And we've been able to define that according to different levels in leadership. And over the course of this year, we'll be talking much more around those capabilities and helping leaders to develop those skills as they progress through their leadership journey.
Brilliant. What about mentorship? I know you and your team have been very intentional around mentorship and coaching and how you think about that. Share a little bit of that with our audience.
Yeah, I think that the mentorship, again, needs to be much more intentional now than it was before. In that we're not all sort of working next to each other and learning from, the seasoned professionals that we have around the industry as easily as we used to. So it needs to be much more intentional, maybe a little more structured, and looking for the right skills and behaviors and expertise that is going to be making a difference in the coming years, as opposed to what made a difference in previous years. So having those relationships outside of the line management is normally the best way of doing that. And also making sure that mentors are trained. Often you find that people are given a mentor and there's sort of no training for the mentor or the mentee when they're starting off this new relationship. And it's about finding the bits of the Venn diagram that overlap for each person, so that they both get something from it. Because our seasoned professionals, they want to leave a legacy. But then you have the dichotomy of the fact that our most experienced, let's say loss adjusters, for example, are also generating large amounts of fees, maybe heading towards retirement. So there's kind of a balance between this idea of mentoring other people, leaving a legacy, but also, doing your work effectively and generating the revenue that you're capable of. So it's about managing those aspects, and the organizations that do that well are the ones that have really strong mentoring programs.
Yeah, thank you for that. One other area I think a lot about, whether I'm out in the industry and speaking with other key stakeholders and leaders, or even internally, is feedback. I feel like in my experience, in my career, feedback was a gift and it came regularly and it was across the board to help me be the best, what I was doing well, and certainly what I needed to develop and consider to improve. And I find that feedback isn't maybe as freely given. And do you have a thought around that or a point of view to share?
No, absolutely. And I think you make a really good point in that the whole world of performance management has kind of been in discussion for the last few years, with some companies abandoning performance reviews, for example, and saying that, on their own performance reviews don't do anything of any good. And on their own, I would absolutely agree. But if that performance review is part of an ongoing, continuing improvement conversation that's happened all year, with regular check-ins, with regular feedback given on what's going well as what could be improved, then they're a really good summary. There's a phrase in my home country, in the land of football or soccer, where it's a moment to put your foot on the ball. And it's where you stop in a training game, put your foot on the ball and see what's happening around you. That's what the performance review is. But it doesn't mean that everyone stays silent and doesn't give feedback during the entire match. And that's, I think, the important thing, as well as ensuring people are often really good at giving, or really direct at giving negative feedback or developmental feedback, because they know exactly what they saw that they didn't like. They know exactly what the person did, and they know exactly what they should do instead. And then when someone's done a really good job, people often just default to, "Hey, well done, Kimberly, that was great, good job." And you have no idea what it was you did well, or what it was that needed repeating. And it could be something completely different. So when we're giving feedback, should be a given that people get feedback all the time. But we need to make sure that we're just as focused and intentional around positive feedback in saying what it is that we like, as we are when we give developmental feedback. But it needs to be also on the quality of the work and the behaviors and development and all of those things, rather than just the output.
Yeah, and more frequent so that they I like the way you said that. So they get the positive, not just the negative, and
Yeah.
feedback becomes just routine.
Yeah, and not in a formulaic way. Like the old days of leadership training where you should sandwich feedback. And then what happens is someone says, "Hey, Ian, you did a really good job this morning." And all I'm waiting for is the but, because you get used to that sandwiching of feedback. So it's about giving in the moment, real time feedback. The moment you see someone doing something well, highlight exactly what it is that you like. The moment you see someone doing something that could be done differently, again, highlight the opportunities available there. And that's just for in the moment, snappy feedback. That may lead to a longer coaching conversation. It may be something that you refer back to in a check-in, by having regular check-ins. It may be something that appears in a performance review. But ultimately, it's having those interactions. And we have our optimizing performance framework, which highlights all those key interactions that leaders have to have the opportunities to reinforce the right behaviors and talents and expertise, and to redirect the ones that aren't maybe getting us where we need to.
Yeah, great. Weigh in on how leaders create clarity and meaning around role expectations, development roadmaps, and even transparent progression criteria. Career mobility is so important to employees today.
You're absolutely right. The career mobility or any form of flexibility or autonomy is something that drives a lot of people entering the workforce and who've recently entered the workforce at the moment. It is that flexibility. And where leaders, I think, can make a big difference is in giving that autonomy to people, in giving that empowerment. Now, that sounds like anyone can do whatever they like. Well, of course they can't. I like to feel I'm empowered in my role and I've got a degree of autonomy in my role, but I can't do whatever I want. I have demands. There's things I have to do. There's constraints. There's things that I'm not allowed to do that I'd love to. But once you accept the demands and you work within the constraints, then you have choices. So the big thing for leaders is to highlight and emphasize where the choices are. But that can only happen when the demands and the constraints are understood and how those align with the purpose of the team or of the organization and what we're trying to achieve. So, because then those empowered decisions get made in the context of the purpose. So, for example, if I decided I wanted to be autonomous and create a leadership course on how to, I don't know, create a macrame or macrame pot holder, that isn't aligned with our mission. It's not aligned with our vision. It's not aligned with anything. So it still needs to be aligned with that, because I shouldn't be training our leaders how to do that. We should be working with our leaders on all the things we're talking about today. So it needs context for people to be empowered, and a lot of companies miss that out and therefore don't empower their people. But I think that's the key factor at the moment is around identifying the purpose, understanding that, identifying where there are opportunities for people to be autonomous and make their own choices or step outside of the process because it's the right thing to do for that customer or that client in that moment, and know that it's the right thing to do and we're not just tied to a process. But also the opportunity to learn stuff, to get good at things, to build a mastery. If those three things are in place, the purpose, the autonomy, and the mastery, everything else tends to fall into place with people.
I love it. I hope our audience is taking notes. That's a good one. As tech reshapes workflows, how can organizations deliver consistent outcomes and better experiences for our clients and our colleagues?
I think I'll start with the colleague side of things is by having a sort of framework that describes the capabilities of people that when they do their job well, as I was saying earlier on, having that framework that's consistent. So that if I'm working in Australia, for example, and I want to move for my career to get some experience working in London, UK, then having something that's similar, the way that I manage being similar, the attributes that I have being recognized, similar types of feedback on what I do well and what I don't do well, that kind of plays to that much more mobile workforce. And also the technology, referring to the technology side, the way that we can now use AI to fully understand what our colleagues are telling us in engagement surveys, for example, falls into that bracket of things that we couldn't do before. We could plow through 13,500 comments, which is what we got in our last engagement survey, but to be able to throw them into AI and ask it for themes, and to find out that the theme of a number of the comments, a big proportion of the comments, was actually about a topic that we weren't even asking about. Those sorts of insights are really useful. and enabling it. And that's the kind of thinking that as an organization, I think, are starting to do really well, is to understand how things impact our colleagues, how they are perceived by our colleagues. And again, that's another thing that AI on its own won't necessarily do.
Yeah, you've spent some time thinking about AI co-pilots around not just learning and development and supporting roadmaps of career mobility, but also reward systems that recognize talent development and cross-team mobility. I think our audience would be interested in that, given the AI component and opportunity for talent development.
Yeah, and I think that the mobility side ties in with the reward side in that, compensation rates are different in different countries. But that understanding of that is something, again, that we can very quickly grasp by looking at different compensation models that we have and comparing them to what's available in other countries. And it can't be the same everywhere. There are things that are valued in some cultures that are valued less in others. Mm-hmm. So I think it's about being as consistent as possible, but as different as necessary, whether that's a difference across our different business lines or whether that's difference across our different cultures and geographies. It's identifying where we can be consistent and offer the same high quality colleague experience where, the things that are provided as an environment where you can perform well, an environment where people are connected, an environment where well-being is valued, an environment where growth happens. Those are the things that drive a world-class colleague experience. And those are very similar from country to country. I've been fortunate enough to work all around the world, and there are some very strong common grounds that people strive for in the workplace. And it's around performance. It's not just around the well-being and those types of things, but it is also around performance. But well-being, connectedness, and growth are the other pillars that drive that. And the more consistent we can be about that, and what we can do at a global level of things that apply to everyone. What can we do in terms of a business line or in terms of a local geography, or even what can a team leader do in their team to provide that translate it so that it makes some sense.
Yeah, well stated. Human-centric innovation and balancing tech with trust. What a deep topic that is. We could probably have another podcast just on that. But as organizations adopt AI faster, how do we ensure innovation remains human-centric?
I think it's about ensuring that we have an understanding of what it is our customers and our clients and our colleagues value. And they will value speed of service, they will value accuracy, but they also value that human connection. And I think it's about how we make that happen. And yes, with the AI things, yes, there's a phrase that I think it's been attributed to Ronald Reagan. It's also been attributed to Lenin, Vladimir, not John. I heard it from Jennifer Darkey, who is our global CR operations head. And it's trust but verify. So yes, trust what AI is telling you, trust the data it's showing you, trust whatever trends it identifies, but verify them. And just make sure, because sometimes it does get it wrong. And also the longer a thread goes of different prompts with AI, sometimes it starts to forget what the original question was. So it's important to keep it on track. And that requires people to do that. And also to think about what the ongoing consequences are. So, for example, we could be used to having very open, psychologically safe conversations. But if we know everything's being transcribed, I may be inclined to be less open if it's only going to appear in some search that someone does later on. So it's about when we use AI for transcripting meetings, because that has implications even from a legal perspective in terms of what's discoverable and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of thought needs to go into it. And again, organizations have creating committees that have governance over that and what is it used for and what isn't it used for. So that's a long answer to what was a very simple question, but there's
no, it's great. That and the governance did come up in the global risk survey. So for our audience, those of you interested, head to Sedgwick.com. You'll be able to see the entire global risk survey, and there is quite a section in there on AI governance and preparedness for AI implementations and transformation. Ian, let's close with some practical steps. What's the playbook leaders can use to operationalize reskilling and human-centric innovation?
I think it's all about being future focused and development orientated. As humans, again, we're very used to evaluating what's happened in the past, and yeah, it's important to do that. And we have performance reviews, and we have everything that goes along with that. But the important thing is for that to be future focused and development orientated. What is it I'm doing that I could do more of? Or how can I leverage the skills that I'm applying in this area to another area? What things could I improve in the way that I do things? And those conversations should be happening all the time, in a psychologically safe environment. In that, recently I've taken over 2 new departments or 2 new functions, and however much I could have pretended I knew about them, I didn't. But in a psychologically safe environment, you can say, I don't know anything. I need to do a lot of learning on this. And that's the environment we want to create, is where people are comfortable with the things they don't know and are capable of and comfortable in saying that they don't know them and saying what they need to learn to be able to do their jobs better or more comfortably, or to build readiness for a future role. So it's about being future focused, and being future focused removes a whole bunch of other or mitigates a bunch of other sort of negative factors that come into employment, like blame culture. In that if we're thinking only about the future, nothing's gone wrong there yet. So there's no one to blame for anything because it's the future. And just that mindset changes things a little bit. Taking a mindset that assumes that no one's trying to come to work wanting to do a bad job. People don't wake up in the morning and say, today I'm going to be really unpleasant in meetings and I'm going to mess things up. I don't think people do that. People are sometimes unpleasant in meetings. They do sometimes mess things up. We all do, but it's not intentional. And having the mindset that no one's wanting to be like that is the mindset that drives the right feedback, and the right development in the future, and the right environment to work and learn and grow in. But also, I think another big thing, just before I know we're wrapping up, is that we've kind of got to a point in our careers where we've probably, it's safe to say, have learned most of what we know from mistakes that we've made, or some of the big lessons were from mistakes that we made and living through those. And what happens with leaders, especially today, is that we have these processes and systems and controls in place that are designed to prevent people from making mistakes. And I think if there's an opportunity where someone makes a mistake, and as long as it's not damaging to a colleague, a customer, a client, or the company, it's important to allow people to make that mistake and see the impact of that. And to help them work through that, because otherwise they don't get the lessons. They just have things to remember, and we forget the things to remember. We do remember the lessons we learned when we experience them. So it's allowing that freedom, comfort, and safety to make mistakes.
Well, what a rich conversation, and I'm so appreciative of you joining me today. From AI and technology as they're reshaping roles, to reskilling and upskilling, that it must be continuous, elevating human work with leadership capabilities, mentorship, and one of my passions, clear capability frameworks, consistency and better experiences. Those come from the aligned competencies that you discussed, and mobility tools, along with the keeping the human in the loop practices. Any final thoughts?
No, I think it's final thought really would be that companies have their core values, and those in a lot of cases are words on a wall where people learn what those values are. And the important thing for organizations who have values is that we need to ensure that those are embedded in everything that we do. That it's not like, today we're going to talk about values. It's that today we're going to talk about development. How do we do that aligned with our values? Today we're going to talk about operational results. How do we do that aligned with our values? Today we're going to have a really difficult conversation with someone where maybe it isn't working out. How do we do that in line with our values? That's when the values come to life, not when they're written on a wall and everyone learns them in the right order. And
Wonderfully.
a good competency framework has those woven all the way through it.
Yeah, wonderfully said. Thank you so much, Ian. And I know that our audience gained a lot of tips for their own organizations. And an audience, I encourage you to reflect on what Ian has shared today. The reskilling roadmap, I think, is a takeaway all of us can consider, and human-centric innovation plans as we look to transform our businesses to be sure that we have a business that will thrive tomorrow. So thank you, Ian. Thank you to our guests. Be sure and hit the like button and subscribe on your way out so you never miss an episode. Until next time, be well.